Yo, yo, how's it going? Oh, it's so fucking cold in here. My whole knuckles just it's cracked like a bitch. It's chilly as fucking Wisconsin. Worst state. Those are just alcoholism and sadness. Yo, what is bopping? Hmm. Do you haven't? Did you watch the recent video by Lawrence Anton, The Antenatal's Dilemma? I have not. Let's see. Um, well, it might have actually. Let's find out. Oh, is this Professor Anton? Hmm. I don't know. You have the Antenatalist Dilemma. No, I have not, but I also don't really like Corey Anton. Not as a human being. As a human being, I'm sure he's fine. But in terms of his philosophical beliefs, I think he's either disingenuous or damn okay. Like he's, I assume he's disingenuous, but that or he's just really glib or sadistic and doesn't realize it. Like, you know, either way, I'm kind of like, don't, not a big fan. Actually, the title is Antinatalism: The Future of Suffering. Magnus Finding, environmental. Oh, I love Magnus Finding. Magnus Finding, I'm a big fan of that lad. Antinatalism and the Future of Suffering. Okay. Fuck. Future of Suffering. I'm in the storm. Wow. Okay. Oh, this is gonna be great. Okay, I have not seen this yet, but low key, love Lawrence. Lawrence is great. Magnus Vinding, also great. I literally own his book, Suffering Focused Ethics. Um, so love Magnus Vinding. I mean, he's a little too concerned about all the sci-fi stuff, but at the same time, it is a big concern. Like, I understand the existential risks of all that, but I'm not really too interested in all existential risk stuff. I'm more just like, we're probably all gonna get ourselves nuked anyways. So it's just kind of like limiting the suffering of like, I'd rather humans do the good things instead of like trying to chase pleasure and bullshit. But we're on the same page as when it comes to that. But when it comes down to worrying about all the space stuff, I don't know, man. I'm not too concerned. But I do love his book. His book is great. He's definitely on board with almost everything. I think I agree with him on like 99.9% of things. There's just one little twinge where I disagree on, which is like a thing that me and Seb also disagree on. A lot of and some of Delhi negativity, I think his name is. A lot of Ethelists actually disagree on this. Basically, as native utilitarians, a lot of people think there's like a threshold where it becomes too unbearable and it can never be inflicted. I think no, it doesn't matter. It's just a numbers game. So, like, even if it's a small little pinprick, eventually they add up to it enough to make it so it's like not worth inflicting, and you'd rather inflict like something far more heinous in nature, but only for a single instance. Someone's about to fuck me. I suppose I could watch it on stream, his video. I just feel like it'd be a little, like, rude to watch a video that came out, like, a day ago on stream. If it was a couple weeks, I'd be like, okay, cool. But then I feel like if it's like a day, if someone watches it on my stream, they're not going to be, like, motivated to watch it in his stream, you know? So I might review that in the future. But for now, I'm just going to watch it in my own time. Just because watching it on stream would be a little bit thefty in feeling, and I don't feel like doing that to my boy. But that guy did the sneaky. We need a debate between a channel like Matt Dillahunty. Matt Dillahunty. I hate myself. Why can I not remember names? Matt Dillahunty. Matt Dill. Clickety clack. Who is this? Oh, that lad. I remember him. Yeah, if we could get like a debate between like Matt Dillahunty and like fucking Magnus Vinding or something, that'd be fucking awesome. There's a weird vault you can open up. Where is this guy located? Frenzy Field. That's pretty cool. I didn't realize this giant fucking vault you could open. Do you do street activism? My favorite activist is Danny Shan. Hey, social experimentalist, my boy. Yeah, I do street activism. I don't really record videos when I do it, just because I don't have like a GoPro or like anything to like do that. So I basically just carry around one of those like "Stop Having Kids" signs that say abortion is an act of love, and then the other side says birth is the catalyst of all suffering and death. So I just walk around the local. I'm from Green Bay, so I walk around the Packers Stadium, and there's a Planned Parenthood nearby where a bunch of pro-life people protest. So sometimes I'll counter protest them, and I'll just like walk with them with my own sign. So I do some activism as well as this type of activism. I guess not really. It's not really activism. It's kind of just trying to talk to people who are. Every once in a while, people will come on here that I aren't antinatalists, then I can have conversations with them. But for the most part, it's fellow antinatalists and ethalists and, negative utilitarians and jazz that hop onto my channel. So I'm like, hey, how's it going, y'all? But when it comes down to it, yeah, this isn't the best form of activism. The street activism is probably a little bit more effective. Occasionally, I'll go on to like Bingo Live or like fucking Omegle, and then there's like this other streaming thing that I went on a couple days ago. Basically, I just chat with like strangers and try to get their opinions on veganism and ethalism and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't have the banner going. I like Danny Shine quite a bit. He's a little out there, but I do like him quite a bit. He's a cool dude. Then again, most antinatalists are a little out there, so I can't really say much about that when it comes. I'm out there also, but quite a bit. I'm 23. Oh, person down there. Hello. He doesn't even notice me. Strategy. He might actually kill me. That'd be pretty cool. Oh, he has a shotty. Yeah, he killed me. I got him down to that nothing. Yeah, I am 23 years old. I'm going to be 24 December 15th. So I'm basically 23 and a half at this point. It's like almost halfway to 24. Every day is Asian. I'm just aging slowly. And I like scrunch up my forehead. I got like wrinkles, man. I'm looking at old. Got tattoos and stuff. You're just probably like sitting here like, yo, bro, I'm older than you. Just kidding. Does your parents? Did my parents know I'm antinatalist? Yeah, they know I'm antinatalist. They know I'm ethicist, pro-mortalist. I'm pretty open about my philosophical positions at home and on campus. I'm a philosophy major, so most people know that I am an ethicist, antinatalist, vegan. Like basically all my friends do. Basically, almost all my immediate family does. My grandma knows. My grandma knows. My parents know. Brother knows. Um, Extended family don't really mention it to them very often, slash at all, because there's not really much of a point. I've brought it up before. I brought up like infanticide at the table before at Easter once. I was just like, oh yeah, there's this philosopher named Peter Singer, a really cool guy, and he's like, oh, I've heard of Peter Singer because we're talking about veganism. And I'm like, yeah, A controversial figure, though. He's known for like infanticide and stuff. He's like, "Oh, what's infanticide?" And I'm like, let me tell you." What do they think about that? Do they agree with your views? I don't know. It's hard to tell. I feel like people are a little bit. People like to say they agree with you just to like make you feel better. So when it comes down to it, I don't really know their honest opinions. A couple of my friends think I'm probably onto something, but they're like, "Oh, I don't think we should like tell people what to do." And I'm like, "What? We're okay with telling people what to do when it comes to like other laws?" And they're like, "Yeah, but like birth is different." And I'm like, "How?" And they're like, "Well, it's like other laws you're like harming someone." And I'm like, "You're literally harming someone by bringing someone to existence." They're like, "It's different." And I'm like, "Explain how?" And they're like, "I can't, but it's different. I feel it somehow." And then there's like my parents, who I think I've convinced my mom of antinatalism, that it's like wrong to bring new people into the world. But I don't think I've convinced her of like pro-mortalism. I don't think I convinced her of ethylism. So I think I've convinced her that like I don't think I've convinced her like life's bad, but I think I've convinced her that like life isn't worth bringing people into. Yeah, you can join the stream. Uh, Here, I'll send another invite into the. Oh, I got distracted. Uh, yeah, you can join. I'm just gonna play in Fortnite, but you can feel free to join. I'm gonna be like, I'll just be responding to you. So I'm not gonna be looking at the screen, which will make me look even more autistic than I naturally am. But nonetheless, we can deal with that. Ooh, howdy, howdy. I can't hear you, by the way. Can you hear me, or your mic might be muted?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, now I can.
So you're a philosophy major.
I am.
So what does your batchmate think about your philosophy? This philosophy.
Oh, what was that? Apologies.
What does your philosophy batchmates think about this philosophy?
Most of them kind of think that I'm a little out there. They don't really agree with it. A couple of people I think have agreed with a lot of aspects of it, but they just can't really get on board with it. Like, surprisingly, you would think philosophy majors would be a little bit more aware of how you can't just be like, well, man, like I just don't I disagree, man. We're gonna leave it at that. But no, like there's so many people who are like subjectivists out there that are it's toxic as fuck. Like people will just there's a lot of subjectivists that are like completely just like you make your own thing, I make my own thing. If you want to not have kids, and that's up to you. But if I want to have kids, and that's up to me. And I'm like, okay, are there wrong actions in the world? And we're like, yeah, there's things people shouldn't do. And I'm like, okay, then we have to have a conversation about morals. And they're like, well, we could do that, but having kids isn't immoral. And I'm like, you can't just say that. You can't. So I go to a Catholic college, by the way. It's not just like a normal, like, it's not like Yale or something like that or Harvard. I go to like a Catholic college. So it's like just full of a bunch of fucking Christians. So, I mean, not everybody's Christian there, but when it comes down to it, most people don't have the most brilliant ethical takes.
So have you discussed this philosophy with your professors?
My professors,
Yes.
yes.
What do they think about that?
Um, well, majority of mine are also Christian, so it's kind of weird. Like, one of them was just like, I think you would really like Friedrich Nietzsche's. You need to read Friedrich Nietzsche's. And I'm like, okay. So I bought the his little collection, genealogy, morals, or whatever, and I'm reading that slowly. I hate every moment of it. It fucking sucks. It's basically just a shitty version of Saran, and at least Saran is like depressing and like pretty based for the most part.
Hmm.
Nietzsche's, on the other hand, is just like become your own person. Even if you're like a really shitty person, just like embrace it, man. Do not be a slave. Caring about people means you're a slave. Become the master of yourself. Just start beating up homeless people if you feel like it. Don't let society tell you not to, man. Just you know. Have you seen American Psycho and just saw that? Maybe just go up to that guy and go in the alley. If you want to do that, do not let your dreams be dreams. No, I'm not gonna like fuck. I hate Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm sorry, but
But
then yeah, there's like other teachers who are just like one of them is a divine command theorist. So he basically believes that like in divine command, but he also believes that God only commands what is. He basically is a divine command theorist, but feels like he makes human nature aligned with what is in key with God's commands, so therefore, like, we're not like upset with his nature. I guess I don't fucking know. So, and then there's some other teacher of mine who's named Cindy. She's really chill, but unfortunately, she's a deontologist still. I mean, it's Christian college, so it's gonna be how it is. So she's all big on like consent and stuff, and I'm like, okay, that's unfair. Consent is cool, but just as a concept, right? And she's like, nah, man, consent. I'm like, you do realize we're constantly violating each other's consent, so like all the time. And she's like, yes, and that's a tragedy. I'm like, you do realize like it's different than like a utilitarian sense though, like violating people's things. Like utilitarians are like we're constantly violating each other's stuff, but it's like for the sake of utility. For deontologists, it's like that's an infallible right. You cannot violate that no matter what. So like basically, we're just forced to all just die. And then she's just like, I don't know, man. Like there are things in life that have more value than just pain, like art and stuff. And I'm like, no, man, you don't understand. Art, the value in art is only derived from the person witnessing the art. If I just have a piece of art and I throw it onto Mars and just let it sit there, and then I leave Mars, the art has no value. No one's observing it anymore. People just can't grasp that. So like, I don't know, man. My professors, I like them. They're all really chill, and I like them as human beings, but I don't really respect their beliefs very much. The closest one I think is probably Ben Chan, but I really don't know what his beliefs are like at all. All I know is he's in the bioethics department, and he's pretty cool when it comes to most things like euthanasia and stuff. He's cool with having those conversations, and I'm thinking about having him be the dude that I interact with when I write my thesis next year. But he's also just told me to look into long termism, and I fucking hate long termism because it's goddamn just transhumanism, but more words attached to it. It's just like we're thinking about the long term. We're not like just trying to like transcend humanity. We're thinking about like everybody in the future. Shut the fuck up. Just like trying to dress up their little sci-fi things with benevolence, and I'm like, god damn it, I hate this. So yeah, this is just me constantly being like angry 24/7 in my philosophy degree, and like basically skipping my political philosophy class like all the time because I just absolutely hate the students' guts in that class. Again, private Catholic Christian college, everybody's basically just like straight up like Republican as fuck, just like let the homeless die. And I'm like, I hate this.
so, were you born into any religious family? Like, uh,
No, my mother just happens to work at the college, and if you work there for 2 years, then you
hmm,
get free college for anybody in your immediate family.
hmm.
So I basically just got lucky, uh, as I am with a lot of things in life. I got lucky. So
So, but if you look at the Christianity and if you think about the concept of eternal conscious torment, eternal hell, I think your process and the students there has more reasons to choose anti-natalism over you if you're an atheist, because in an atheistic world, you life suffering ends with death, but for a Christian, life suffering is eternal, right? If they end up in a hell, so they're imposing the risk of hell upon them, hell upon their kids and descendants.
basically. And it's weird because I mean, they just assume that like God has a plan for them, and like, oh, like if you go to hell, you voluntarily go to hell. And I'm like, no, like even if that is the case, and we're voluntarily going to hell, people can be wrong in their assessment of situations, right? So it's
Hmm.
like if someone's wrong, like someone can believe that in a relationship they're in is good, but it can be abusive. Just as someone, if someone like turns out God is real and hell is real, and like we're voluntarily going to hell and it's not God damning us, well, doesn't mean we're rational for doing that. So why should God like punish us for irrational behavior that we have no control over? And it's just like no one fucking understands that in like a Catholic college. They all just have their fucking heads up the Bible's ass.
Hmm. So, are you doing bachelor's or master's in philosophy?
Bachelor's. I can only get 4 free years of college, and I ain't gonna pay for anything like that. Like, college is bullshit. The only reason I'm doing it is just for funsies, and the
Hmm.
fact that, like, I can get a paper that says I did something with my life.
Yeah,
But
you might be the next Bennett.
basically, basically, the
So,
dumb paper makes me seem like I'm valid, so I'm like, okay, I'll get it.
so if you identify as a promoterist and something happens to you, we won't have another Bennett in the future.
I mean, I'm not gonna. I am a pro mortalist, but I'm not gonna kill myself anytime soon. Hopefully, so unless I like randomly like get this like psychotic break and then just like kill myself. But as far as I'm aware, that's not gonna occur. So yeah, I'm gonna try to stick it out as far as I can into the future and try to prevent suffering via convincing people of veganism and antinatalism, all the good stuff.
But I think there's a Christian Catholic guy, a priest actually in some European country, who actually came up with some theological reasons for euthanasia. Have you read him?
Theological reasons for euthanasia.
Yeah, where he assigns that it's okay to kill yourself. Not euthanasia, actually suicide itself, where he states that it's a good thing to kill yourself. There's a priest.
Is it similar to the idea that I used to have as a wee lad, wee little psychopath, where I was just like, yo, what if we're ought to die the instant we become Christian to prevent like essentially ourselves from going to hell by maybe being deconverted?
I don't. I actually didn't read it because I don't want to go to that suffering part of it. I'm more like the happy side of the antinatalist part, where I find like the purpose of my life and being happy with life. So I don't read really negative stuffs.
Ah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
So you're more
So
for it because of the purpose aspect of it, or
like I watched Danny Shine's video, Social Experimentalist, because he's very funny and he's spreading the message through some humor, right? So I want all the anti-natalists to be really happy because they are ending suffering for billions of their descendants in terms of long termism.
yeah, that is true. That is true. It's interesting how there's like so many versions of long termism. Like you look at long termism from like the antinatalist perspective, and it's just like we're long term preventing suffering. But then if you look at it from like the transhumanist pleasures utilitarian perspective, it's just like we must create as many human beings as we can.
Uh, I don't know. I was having this conversation with David Pierce. You know him?
Uh,
This
David.
David Pierce.
Yeah, I have problems with David Pierce, but I do like David Pierce because he's an antinatalist. But I don't like the fact that he's a transhumanist. But I know who he
Okay,
is.
but I think transhumanism is I would say that antinatalism is another kind of transhumanism where you're trying to prevent suffering and death.
I don't have problems with death. I like antinatalism as a consequence because I'm a consequentialist.
Hmm.
So I'm not. I don't like the deontological aspects of antinatalism very much, and there's just some problems with it I have. But when it comes down to it, I like it as a consequence of not bringing people into existence, which is a good
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
But when it comes to like the whole idea that like death is a bad thing, I don't think death is bad. I'm an Epicurean slash promortalist, so I basically just think that death is like a transition into non-existence. It's just a
But
ceasing sensation, basically.
if you look at if you consider death as an event versus a state versus a process till the end point, the process till the death, the where you finally don't no longer exist. It's isn't it painful?
Hmm.
The dying process.
The dying process, yes, but dying will happen no matter what, and there are ways to die. There's ways to die without well, there's ways to die without it having a long dying process, and the death is not bad. The dying is potentially bad depending on how you go,
Yeah.
but the death itself is just a word we use to describe the transition to non-existence. Like once again.
But if you look at, let's say there's a individual, and he was born in a really poor family, and he really worked hard in his life. All his hard work, all those suffering, isn't it going in vain through the act of death? Like the all has become meaningless because of the event death, because he worked for the fruit and he's no longer there to enjoy that.
Well, I'm an identity nihilist. Have you heard of that before or no?
What I didn't hear you.
Oh, identity nihilism.
Oh, no, I have not heard about that.
It's the idea that there's no such thing as a continued sense of self. Like we have an illusion of self, but the
Okay.
idea of even talking about a self is like a flawed concept. I'd basically believe that we're just a composition of memories, and we're just kind of like observing things. We're like a
Hmm.
composition of observed images and sounds and sensations compiled together to make ourselves. And every time a new experience happens, we're basically creating a new version of ourselves.
Hmm.
So like even I'm not the same person I was at the start of this conversation, and neither are you basically. Like certain things in our brain have changed, certain experiences have been added to our memory banks and stuff, and certain aspects of ourselves have potentially shifted, here and there. So it's
Hmm.
like we're not the same person we were 10 years ago, nor 5 months ago, nor even a month ago, probably, nor even probably like an hour ago for some people. So it's like we're constantly shifting. And so basically, I believe we're
uh
constantly dying, basically, and constantly being like reborn. So
hmm.
basically, we're imposing on our future selves when we
So you're
continue to be
violating the
alive.
consent of your future being, right? They didn't ask to be.
Yeah, basically. So so basically I'm doing a trade-off where it's like I'm violating my future being by continuing to be alive, but the trade-off is preventing entire beings from having their multiple like versions of their lives take a place. So,
So
it's
there's this philosophical problem, right? Where this ship is being changed, modified and modified. Will you? So how do you answer that? Do you think ships are no, or is it the same thing?
I think the ship is different, assuming it's like it's every time you take off a new part of the ship, it's different. It's not like the ship of Theseus is like how they said like, oh, this is a ship, and then you replace one bit of the ship, and it's like, oh well, it's still the ship of Theseus, even though you replaced one plank.
Hmm.
I think no. Instant you place one plank of the ship of Theseus is no longer the ship of Theseus anymore.
Hmm.
But there's the whole idea of like well, what if as you're taking apart the ship of Theseus, you throw those planks overboard, but it turns out there's another ship coming behind, and they're collecting all the planks, and they end up building a new ship built of the old parts of your ship. So
Hmm.
basically, what is the true ship of Theseus? The one that you were building with all the replacement parts, or the one that was constructed with all the old parts? And assuming that all the nails and everything somehow are a part of the old ship, I'd say that the new ship constructed, which is like literally everything from the old, would be the real ship of Theseus. But the instant you start replacing parts of the ship of Theseus and taking parts away from it, it is no longer the same ship, basically.
Yeah. But my question is, like, if you're building it with the same structure, you need some structural basis for that ship to be built, right? So you're using something constant there to build that ship. Like,
You mean
or
like
else,
a like
if the structural basis is not there, then it will be something else.
so you're talking about like the framework of the ship, basically,
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
design, essentially.
yeah. Design. Like the ship is not becoming some car or something. Ship is remaining as a ship itself, even though it's made of something new.
Mm, yeah, I'd say it's still a ship, but just as like a person still a person.
Hmm.
Like I wouldn't say like I'm no longer human when I take on new memories. But I'd say
Hmm.
I'm no longer the same Brant that I was
Hmm.
before. Like, you could even say that I'm still Brant. I'm just not the same Brant. And it's very similar to what you're saying, I think. You would say that they're the ship even
Hmm.
though the ship's layout is the same, it means it's still like the design is still a ship either way. So it's still going to be a ship. It's just not going to be the ship of Theseus once you replace one of the planks.
Yeah.
If you,
So can you call that, let's say, those old memories or the instincts we have from childhood as some constant?
they're kind of a constant, but then again, memory is very flawed. I'd say the biggest constant is just our like our software, I guess. Like unless some type of damage occurs to it or development, but like in general, like if you're born like a psychopath, you're gonna remain a psychopath. If you have born
Hmm.
borderline personality disorder, you're gonna have borderline personality disorder your whole life. So like if you're born neurotypical unless you have like major trauma that like scrambles your brain, you're gonna be neurotypical like your whole life. So like
Hmm.
I think like our brain chemistry is like the closest thing we can get to like a constant, but even then it's like those constants matter, but not in the sense where I think it defeats the claims of identity nihilism, especially in the idea of like, hmm, I guess there's a couple of different versions of identity nihilism. Uh, there's two versions of identity nihilism. The one I'm talking about, and then there's another version of identity nihilism where it basically says that all things. I kind of subscribe to them both because I am an empiricist. I just don't talk about this other version because it's a little bit weird. But basically, every empiricism is kind of just funky to explain. Basically, everything is derived from like outside experiences. So like we're just compiling memories, as I said, and because we're just literally comprised of experiences, there is really oh I'm getting shot at. Oh, this guy's so bad. He could have killed me, but he didn't. I literally was like had my hands in there. Okay. Um. Yeah, as I was saying. God, that guy was horrible. Um. Fuck. What was I saying? Do you remember what I was saying?
Yeah, you were saying about the two versions of antinatalism. Something weird, some weird antinatalism. You were
Oh
telling.
yeah, the two versions of identity nihilism. Yeah, there's the one I was just mentioning where it's just like we're constantly being annihilated and reformed, But then there's another version of identity nihilism, which is a little bit different and probably more valid, honestly. I just don't like explaining it very much. Uh, it's just basically saying we're all constructed out of experiences. And because we're constructed out of experiences, we're really just like observing the outside and taking in.
Hmm.
But when it comes down to it, you were literally just composed everything, single thing you think of in terms of like inner memory, inner thought. It's just things that we've observed outside being compiled and formed in certain ways into our brain. But
So
that
I have a
doesn't
doubt.
mean that there is like a self inside here. It just means we're taking things in from the outside and like
Hmm.
compiling them in. But it doesn't mean
Hmm.
there's an actual like self observing that thing. Like there is no like inner consciousness like like doing the taking in of things. It's just like the body is here like a vessel and it just kind of like takes things in.
But then, like the way you are saying that you are imposing suffering upon your own future self without its consent. Does a person who identifies what you said identity anti-narcissist, right? So will they see the kids of the parent as a future self of themselves, where they are okay imposing the suffering upon them because they don't care about it, because it's a similar kind of thing, because where sperm or ovum is being given some new kind of experience, and the zygote grows into a being.
Hmm. Can you repeat that one more time? I think I kind of got the idea, but
So if you see zygote, it's just the cells of two humans which already existed, and now it's accumulating new cells and new experience, everything. So it's more like you're okay with not we get there with the consent problem which arises with your future self. So if you consider the psychote and the future self as a being of your own, because it only accumulates some new cells and new experience, and you're okay with it, isn't it more like the similar thing?
did you say zygote?
Psychote, the fetus.
Yeah, I don't think fetuses are having any experiences. They have, well, other than pain and pleasure, and maybe pleasure if pleasure exists. I don't really think it's being processed. It's like kind of like I guess the way I like to describe this is like if you take someone and put them in a coma,
Hmm.
where someone is in a coma, their nervous system's still there. Like if you like pinch them, like there's going to be like signals being sent up to the brain,
Hmm.
but the brain's just not processing it because
Hmm.
there's not a whole lot going on up there anymore because they're in a
Hmm.
coma. And it's very similar to that with like fetuses. Their brain is just not really developed. They don't really have like a good processing unit of like what's going on. So they have the nervous system and they have signals being sent up to the brain, but there's
Hmm.
nothing processing that in like a meaningful way that like drives like a ton of value. There is still like at least on the experiential like identity type of sense, is there's moral value there in the sense that their pain does matter. But in the sense of like identity, I don't think they have any type of experience going on. They're not really registering that in like a meaningful way.
But I think there you kind of differentiate the different levels of experience one might have, like a human having, like an animal having, like a plant having, based on the signals. If it's some plants, you might say the chemical responses of inside the plant, or some animal, you might say some lower level of animal species, let's say sponges or po- porifera. There's some kind of interactions is helping the being to continue existence. So the experience level, now you are giving a hierarchical order for the experience, and you are categorizing them, I guess. So 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 if you just explain it as just an experience thing, you can consider a fetus as a continuation of their parents organism and experience being accumulated, right?
So like experience is trying to transform from parent to child, basically.
No, no. You what you're trying to tell me was like the current being and the future being is not at all related, because it's just an accumulation of those experience. So what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say is that the zygote is being made from the parent itself, right? Their cells, their sperm or ovum. So it's actually their themselves, and the experiences, whatever kind of experience, even if it's lower or higher level of experience, it's being experiencing. So you can see, if you identify that as identity antinatalism, you can like, you okay with your future being imposed life suffering, you can be also okay if, like, the suffering imposed upon your own kids, because the, there's no identity concept there now, because it's basically you continuing.
Hmm. I think so. Yeah, you would. Yeah, if what you're saying, I think you were saying is essentially, just as it was wrong to impose on the future self, it's also wrong to impose upon uh, a child being born. I'm not entirely sure if I can grasp what you're saying. My bad.
So what I was trying to say was, like the ship example you were trying to tell, if you take the ship's old part and put it in the sea, so you, that's small parts being sperm or ovum, it's basically you, but it's gaining some other pieces from different parts and becoming another ship. So it's basically you continuing through different experience, and it's basically you continuing. There's no concept of you there, right? Because it's different identities there.
So you're saying kind of birth, like giving birth is kind of like reincarnation, not really, but like a continued version of yourself because it's like using your DNA.
So what I was trying to say is that, I didn't get your name. uh
Brant.
Brand. Okay. So brand currently exists. So brand is accumulating some experience, and through that, through consuming food, is accumulating new cells, and some dead cells are being dead. So you're accumulating some new cells and also new experiences, whatever the level of experience being, even if it's very lower when you are in deep sleep versus very highly active experience. Now let's say brand try to, you try to reproduce, and it's basically your cell, which is another which is another cell which can accumulate new cells and new experience, because it can also respond. So it's basically you continuing experience. So if you are okay with you imposing suffering upon your future self, isn't it an equivalent thing for someone bringing new life into existence, because it's basically you.
Yeah, okay, now I know what you're saying. Yes and no. Yeah, I was an egalitarian. I believe people can impose life on other beings. That's why I have disagreements with antinatalism. If they prevent future suffering on a greater scale. So, for example, like, I believe that it's okay for me to continue on my life, even though I'm causing pain to myself and to other beings because I think I'm going to prevent more suffering for other things by making sure they don't come into existence, by, convincing people not to reproduce, not to breed animals into the world. Um, I guess, like, if I go hunting, then eliminating animals in that aspect. But I mean, I think applies the same to people who are breeding people into existence as well. If, for example, you could guarantee, or from a utilitarian risk assessment point of view, uh, pretty much guarantee or think of high reasonability that it'll occur, that you would have a child that would be an antinatalist and or vegan, ethicist or whatever, and would prevent a large amount of suffering in the future more than what they would generate by being alive, then I
Hmm.
think, yeah, it would be acceptable for a parent to continue on their sense of self by having a child. Um, though Though, yeah, it would be a wrong in the sense that you're generating pain, but it would be a good in the sense that you're preventing more pain. So basic consequentialism, essentially. So yeah, yeah, exactly what you said. It would be fine to have a child under my point of view, but only if that were to prevent more suffering than what would be generated by having the child.
Yeah, but okay, but from the other, I don't know, because there are too many terms within. I've never heard about this identity antinatalism. So the antinatalism I prescribe to will be like, I think there's a self, and even though that constant thing what I was trying to speak, that natural instincts or something, some memories which has accumulated, so that is something which continues throughout life. I don't know, I'm not sure. Okay, so that thing I identify as myself, and when I'm creating some new being, even if I have the idea that that kid will spread the philosophy, I'm just basically using that kid as a tool to spread my philosophy. Think it's a selfish act. Like the can it violates the Kantian imperative. Like you are using another person as a tool, right?
Indeed. Well, here's the thing. I don't know if you've realized my channel name, Antisocial Leftist. I'm kind of a psychopath. So I theorize. I basically I believe in psychological hedonism, which is the idea that all people only do actions because they are pursuing pleasure or the illusion of pleasure and the avoidance of pain.
Hmm.
So I think all actions are inherently selfish and
Hmm.
self-motivated, even if people don't realize it. Like a soldier jumping on a grenade to protect his comrades, even that's selfish in my view because it's him doing it because he believes it's programmed into him. Basically, he couldn't have done otherwise. He wanted to jump on the grenade because he would believe the whatever reason like he would be a bad person for not doing it otherwise, or he couldn't live with himself if he would have allowed his comrades to die or something. But either way, it's a selfish act essentially, and I think that
Hmm.
applies to that as to that as well. Like it's going to be selfish to have a child, but it's going to be selfish to help your friend go and move for his house, you know, because you want to hang out with your friend and you enjoy him or her being in a good mood and like you enjoy having people like you and stuff. And so basically you're doing it because it's a self-motivated feeling of making you feel good or whatever. So everything I believe essentially, even the most benevolent actions like me donating 20% of my income to charity is because somewhere in my psychological makeup and somewhere in the way I was raised, it made it so that I feel good when I feel like I'm being morally consistent with what I believe is right. Well, other people, for example, might believe there's right and wrong, but they just might not care if they're being a hypocrite. You know, they might not feel guilty at all for being a hypocrite. But for some reason, baked into my DNA, I feel guilty and I have the urge to not be a hypocrite. So basically, it's me being benevolent, and being a good person is really just me being selfish slash seeking out my own means, even if it objectively is good to
Hmm.
prevent suffering and it objectively is good to promote pleasure, even if all those things are objectively good, it still is not my free will to do them. It's all like just baked into my brain, basically.
So you believe that everything what every human does is basically to increase pleasure and reduce pain.
Basically, and I don't really believe that pleasure exists for the most part. I believe it mostly is an illusion. But
Hmm.
yeah, when it comes down to it, we're just basically pursuing this illusion and trying to avoid pain. So basically, we're
Hmm.
just trying to avoid pain for the most part, and we just think we're pursuing pleasurable sensations. But yeah, when it comes down to it, yeah, we're basically just self-interested and just doing these avoidant slash pursuing behaviors that are self-motivated.
Hmm. So nice to talk to you, Brian. Really enjoyed having conversation with you. I
Yeah, dude.
expect you, yeah, you'll write some great book on anti-Nazism and the next new sensation after David Bennetter.
Yeah, it was awesome having this conversation with you. If you have any final questions before you have to go, feel free to shoot them into the comments or ask them on here. Or if you
Yeah, I
think of
can
anything
ask
in
you.
particular,
So my question is simple. During my childhood, I'm from India. I was born in a really poor family. So in India, we have this lot too much competition to get into the top of everything because too much population, right? So uh, I think I was very narcissist. Yeah, like whatever said, psychological hedonism, right? everything action is selfish. So I wanted to escape from that hellhole, which is basically my place where that poor, really poor place. So I really hard tried. I would at that point I would define myself as a transhumanist who want to help the human species, because all the time I was seeing was just suffering around me because everyone was poor. I really got so in there's an entrance exam like where you get into top colleges in India. Okay, so I cracked that exam, but somehow my uncle passed away, and that led me to an existential crisis and nihilism, meaningless existence. Until so it messed up my grades. I got into the topmost college in my country, but it messed up my grades and I couldn't do well. So I ended up as an average salaried person, average salary. So the income I get is really low, and I couldn't come back to the previous me, which was very competitive, want to achieve everything, all those things. But somehow I overcame my existential crisis through antinatalism. Like I became very proud that I am I am preventing suffering of millions of my descendants from suffering and death for millions of my descendants. Even after discovering that, I couldn't come back to the previous me, which was very happy, competitive, happy, optimistic person. How can I come back to that place if psychological hedonism is the truth?
I that's one of those things where I don't think it's possible and not possible. Yeah, I don't believe in free will, and I don't believe in good or bad people anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because of that, there's no such thing as a bad person. There's no such thing as a good person. There's only bad actions and good actions. So
But
when it
uh,
comes,
but if you look life as something we are always trying to pleasure and running away from pain, if you do an action which leads to pain, will you consider that as a bad action?
yes, I consider that a bad action, but I don't consider the person a bad person for doing the action.
Hmm.
They ought to have not done it, but I don't condemn them for doing it because it wasn't part of their free will.
Hmm.
But when it comes down to it, I am a psychopath of sorts, so I do have recommendations for how to make someone's life subjectively better. There's a philosopher called back in the day called Marquis de Sade, French philosopher. Fucking French
Hmm.
philosophers are crazy, man. But when it comes down to it, he basically had the theory that anybody can become a sadist by just through training, basically by like observing suffering and taking pleasure slash relief out of their suffering. So enjoying other people's pain, basically, because the world has so much pain in it. Um, if you just kind of like become really, really ignorant and slash try to ignore as much of the stuff that you know is true, at least while you're living in your moments, like in your more inquisitive moments when you're being philosophical, like open your mind up to like what you already know. But when you're just trying to go through your life and just like doing your thing, try to be as ignorant as possible to the fact that like of psychological hedonism and identity nihilism. Like live like you're actually a continued person. Live like your friends are continued beings. Live like your pets and stuff like that are continued beings. And your parents and stuff. Like live like that because it makes you feel better. And also at the same time, observe the world like a sadist. Live like an ethical person, but observe the world in a sadistic point of view, in an absurdism and sadism point of view, where you just find everything that's chaotic and horrible just amusing and wild and just like what the fuck. Like you just find it so like horrifyingly chaotic and in a way it's almost artistically beautiful that something so horrible can be perpetuated for so long. Like, like that's how I look at the world. I just find it like amusing and horrifying. Like I'm constantly just like internally laughing in like a hysterical like what the fuck is going on? This is amazingly horrifying. Like like that is basically how it is in my mind. And I mean, it's hard to it's a weird thing where it's like it's depressing, but at the same time, it at least like kind of humors the self. And I don't know if it's a good recommendation or not, but it's better than nothing.
So there's okay, I don't know. There's this I forgot this guy who said the Big Bang was basically God's suicide.
Philippe
There was
Mainlander.
okay, okay. And if you combine, so I read this book by Jordan Peterson. So he says that Superman and God, like what God lacks is some limitations, and so you can't call someone like a superhero is something which really wants to transcend suffering or some obstacles, because God doesn't have any limitations. God cannot do that. So God is not a superhero or something. We so when I look at it, then I look like God might have been. So there might be some being. These are all making stories, right? Humans say some stories to make their life easier. So I look at life like God was so lonely, so perfect, but no limitations. So God wanted to be limited to feel that heroic feeling, maybe. So God tried to euthanize God himself, and and we are here because we need some limitations, suffering, all those things to feel that heroic feeling, to to
Interesting.
fill fill up the empty space of God.
I believe somewhat similar. I believe the Philippe Mainlander idea of like God's suicide. I just believe it was because that God was a perfect being and had nothing it could do besides exist in its own perfection.
Hmm.
And along with the idea of negative utilitarianism, where it's like pain has more value than pleasure, and pleasure is just kind of an illusionary sense for the most part. Like there's far much more pain, and then if the heights of pain have way more intensity than the heights of pleasure do. So I think that basically God being in like this singularity of all possibilities, all possible worlds, all things good
Hmm.
and all things bad, everything perfect and everything flawed. Basically, God being everything that could be didn't need to create anything because it
Hmm.
already existed within itself. So basically, God was forced to exist or to do the one thing that's never done, which is not exist. And
Hmm.
given that experience is inherently negative, God chose for some reason or another to cease existence. And so basically, I believe, yeah, as you said, the whole universe is just God's corpse. I don't know if it would be for a heroic reason, though that's an interesting perspective. I think it's
Yeah.
more of just trying to relieve itself from like the pain of the multiverse by taking on a deterministic form, which is still
No,
painful, but like a
it,
lesser sedin.
it kind of comforts me thinking that God was not feeling that obstacle suffering, so God was kind of getting bored because of no. So we are suffering because what God intended to get, which God lacked, the perfect being. So we should embrace that and kind of enjoy it. Like, it might be the masochist view, right?
I don't know, man. I don't think we're perfect beings. We're definitely not.
So maybe imperfection is the best thing.
I know, man. No, I can't believe that. I've seen too much suffering in this world, too many people that I care for go through too many horrible things to think that them, me, or anything in this world is perfect in its imperfection or perfect in itself. I don't think there's something fundamentally flawed and wrong with the world. I don't think it ought to be the way it is. It's more just like it has to be the way it is because of deterministic forces, and we have to try to shift those deterministic forces in a way where it's like we can't control ourselves, but we can still respond to things in like ways where it's like it's weird. It's hard to talk about determinism while talking about making a difference because it's like you're not the one making a difference. Yet at the same time, we can like make a difference. It's like we're having this conversation and it's still determined. Yeah, it's weird, but it's like yeah, pain still
For me,
matters. So it's like we ought to try to avoid pain and try to prevent as much pain as possible, even if we can't really have any control over the fact that we're doing that.
yeah. For me, the way I see free will thing is that I'm agnostic in that case. So we'll, if we didn't have free will at all, maybe we won't never know that because of the, some conditions. So we don't, we are a limited being. It's too much metaphysical thing, we might not be sure whether we have free will or not.
I'm pretty sure we don't though. I think like just because like we know from multiple aspects of like psychological hedonism, we can't control like what we desire. What we desire is always going to be out of our control, and it's going to be cannot we can if we have a choice between chocolate and vanilla, we can choose the chocolate, but we can't because we want the chocolate, but we can't choose to not want the chocolate. We'll always want the chocolate more, even if we choose the vanilla. So we can't really control our wants and our desires. There's that
So
aspect of lack of free will, but then there's just the fact that like
my question there is, I don't know, like the idea, like so there is this, what do you call, you bring some candies to children, that experiment where some kids are able to resist and others are, so at their lower level, but you can still say that they have that resistance at that one thing and not one thing at that point. But I don't know, I cannot, I am not sure about this free will thing. Another thing is like I don't know whether that quantum, what do you call, I forgot the term for it. So where when you observe something, the result also changes in that experiment.
hmm,
What's that? Quantum.
quantum arrow, quantum string, quantum flux. Try reading it again. I might remember what you're talking
It's
about.
called the observer effect.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I know what you're talking about, like Xenos quantum arrow and stuff. That's kind of what I figured you were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know how a deterministic world can explain an observer effect. So I don't know. It's, for me, I
Well,
think we are so limited to answer the question of free will.
things are on a quantum level. Things aren't very deterministic, but on like a when you zoom out, things are still rather deterministic. Like if I let go of this, it's gonna like drop and stuff like that.
Mm,
Like when it comes down to on like a quantum level, like everything's just constantly like going crazy, and it takes not necessarily an observer, because an observer, like when people say an observer, it makes it seem like you need like a mind to observe something, but what it really means is like some particles interacting with another particle. So basically, as long as like when some particles are interacting with each other, they're gonna have like a deterministic form, kind of, to some extent or another. So it's like, we know when I let go of this, it will drop, and that's going to be deterministic, and it's going to move at the speed of 9.58 or whatever it is meters per second, down to my leg and then bounce off of it. So it's like we know that there's certain aspects of the world that are determined, and in that sense, I think we are like kind of bound. Like the Big Bang occurred, everything
but
expanded,
I have a
gravity
question.
coagled things together.
So in your philosophy, you said there's a group of philosophers called skeptics who question everything. So how much do you trust your brain's ability to really understand things, like the way the
It
idea of free will?
depends what you mean by that. If you mean like, do I trust that my brain, the
Because
fact,
if you look at, like, look at us, we are just a biological product in this universe. Monkeys and all those animals are there. Some monkeys may do some dumb things for, but for the monkey it's really a rational thing. But we humans also are not that superior being with superior brains. So we also do all those things. How much can we put the trust that whatever we are finding is the right answer or something?
well, when it comes down to it, I don't really think the only thing that matters is ethics, in my opinion, like what we ought to do and what we ought not to do, and that is
Hmm.
basically derived from the
No.
experiences of like just experiences, and the primary experiences that have value to them are essentially just pain and pleasure, the illusion of
Hmm.
pleasure.
Hmm.
So when it comes down to it, I don't really think it really matters if everything is an illusion, if I'm really sitting in this room or if I'm just a brain in the vat or something like that. Because
Hmm.
even if I am just a brain in the vat, if I'm a brain in a vat experiencing pain, the pain that I'm experiencing matters.
Hmm.
Similarly, if the pleasure I'm experiencing matters, even if I'm not doing anything, even if I'm just in a even if I'm just an AI program in a simulated world right now, and I don't really exist in any like physical way. I'm just like a bunch of energy inside of a computer. Like, as so long as like I'm generating an experience and that experience is positive or negative, it matters in that sense. So I don't really think like us discovering things mean like, oh, 2 + 2 = 4. How can we really know 2 + 2 = 4? I don't really think like any of that matters really. I think it just matters that like experience generates value.
Yeah. So Brian, nice talking to you. Meet you in other sections, other upcoming videos, upcoming lives. Really had a good conversation. We was able to connect with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad I had this conversation with you.
Hope you have you gifted the book to your process, David Bennett's book or some philosophical books on antinatalism.
Yeah, I own his book, Better Never to Have Been. I haven't read it yet though. It's on my shelf.
Okay, bye.
Ciao. Take care.
Yeah.
Probably just gonna end the stream because D&D starts here in a little bit, I think. Unless it got canceled. Let's find out. Ah, it's still on.